This is Becoming Inclusive from the Kaleidoscope Group, where we're thinking differently about diversity, equity, and inclusion for more empowered people at work. We're committed to real change, and that begins with real conversations. Welcome in.
Hi, I'm Reginald Ponder, and this is Becoming Inclusive. I'm with my co-host, Katherine Potts. Hey, Kat, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. Glad to be here.
We both got this little scratchy voice working. I'm trying to work it out, though. You and I have had a couple of conversations about failure, and in fact, we've talked to Doug about this whole thing of failure, and our discussions have been kind of rich. And today we're going to talk about just being able to fail. And when I look at this whole issue of failure and being able to fail, I think there's a difference between being set up to fail and being able to fail. And I want to kind of map that out for you. Is that being set up to fail is being put in a situation where you don't have the right resources, the right people, all the things that you need to be successful. And there are many situations in organizations where people know that they don't have what they need to be successful. And what the company will say is like, do it. We believe in you. You can do it.
Be an entrepreneur.
Be entrepreneur-ish, figure out how to make it work. We believe in you. But when you don't have the tools to be successful and you fail, that's just being, you started off in the beginning in a situation where you're like, you knew this was not going to, it had a high probability that this wouldn't work. The being able to fail kind of works with that, is that, so when I fail, does my growth in this company, does my trajectory in this company become stunted? So that's one situation. But then there just could be a situation where you have all the stuff that you need, the people, the resources, all of that stuff. And you think that your strategy, that your direction is the right direction, but it ends up not working. What happens there? Do I have the opportunity to fail? I see you about to say something.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of rewind a little bit back to the first part of the point that you're making around like not having the resources that you need, and kind of my comment around, when people are told, be entrepreneur-ish, like you said. I think another facet of that to consider is, depending on your position, you may be able to take that kind of initiative. So there are certain roles where you don't need financial dedication. You don't need certain things to be able to come up with a new style of doing something. For example, my experience in sales in the past, I knew that I had everything I needed, but also, when I felt like there weren't enough resources, more in my tactic. How can I change my sales style, right? That's different than when you're in a department where, for example, if you're in marketing or something like that, where having money and having support and having a team, is needed. You can't really just do it on your own because there's a level of investment that you have to have. So my point being, I just wanted to kind of highlight that there are positions where I think that can work, where you have maybe a little bit more control over being able to use your own resources. And then there's some positions, more than just marketing, that you really do need multiple resources.
Well, for instance, my wife works for a major corporation, and she needs a technical person.
Right.
Currently, right now, she doesn't have that person in that position. They need this person. So it's not one of those things, let's just go off and make it work, because there are so many responsibilities to have this, to have this person. So I want to say, when I talk about people and resources, I'm not saying that you need everything, but there are some basic things in your position or in your responsibilities that you're going to need to make sure that you can fulfill the duties of of your job. And that's where I was coming from. And I think that's very consistent with what you're saying as well. And the reason this is related to DE&I is that there have been studies that have shown that people of color and women have a shorter lifespan for failure. So they're like, you might fail. We might let you fail once, but you can't fail twice, and so on and so forth. And that's important because part of learning is failing. Now, I understand the extent to which you fail. So if you fail and you cost the company, $20 million, that's probably going to be
problematic.
Problematic. So totally understand that there's some parameters around, failure, but the disparities by which you can fail makes it where people, I believe this whole issue of being able to fail makes it where people play not to lose versus play to win. That's what I believe.
Well, and I think too, your point though, like specifically about women, right? Typically, I think that also stems from only having like one woman or two women on a team of predominantly males. So there's that pressure of, I have to, because I feel like when you're if you're in a team of 5 and you're the only female on there, that pressure is already there. And unfortunately, there's that sort of influence of like, whether it's purposeful or not, these 4 other males are going to probably sort of bat for each other in a different way, even maybe just naturally sometimes. And not to blanket that, but it's like, you're kind of like, even though you're the oddball in, you're kind of the oddball out.
But let me ask you this, Kat, is that a number of people don't believe that. Is that when you come in and you say you're the only woman, and is that self-imposed, or are you saying that that's something?
I think both. I think self-imposed, because I can say, like, at least from my experience in those situations, there's in the past more so than now, there's definitely that pressure of like, I'm the only woman on here. I want to represent women. I want to, do that, right? You want to be that person. But I also have been on teams where it's like the boys club, where I am having to work to keep up with them because I see in real time, like, they're maybe more chummy or they have a different relationship with each other than they do, with me. And I don't mean leaving me out. It's just, I think it's something that just naturally happens sometimes. I don't think that is necessarily like intentional. And so that's where I definitely understand people disagreeing, because I'm not saying that when you're in that situation, it's all of those people's fault. It's definitely not. I think when women get in these situations, sometimes it is sort of on us, or maybe mentally. And I'm not speaking for all women, but I do think, and from my experience and the teams that I've been on, the teams that I've managed, I see the difference in real time when it's heavily heavily male and 1 or 2 females.
Well, of course, we work together, and I try to make sure that I hang out with the males all the time and treat you as bad as possible. I work really hard. Obviously, I'm kidding, but I think that your answer, I love your answer, because I think it is both. I think as an African American, when I frequently have been the only African American on the team, there's this pressure that I put on myself to represent in a way that would make you hire other African Americans. So you don't look at me and say to myself, oh, I hired an African American and he was terrible, so I won't hire another one. And people do that because they're like, it just didn't work. So I think it is both. I do put that pressure on myself. At the same time, there is an exclusion or a filling out process sometimes where people are like, is he really one of us? Is he really part of the team? Because culturally, for me, and this is not for every African American, so we want to make sure that this is not a blanket statement, but culturally for me, there were just different things that my white counterparts did that I didn't do. So for instance, I don't play golf, and a lot of my white friends play golf. So they would go off, play golf, do stuff. And I don't think that was intentional. I was invited, but that's just wasn't my game. So people would say, Reg, if you want to be in an N club, you really need to learn how to play golf. So they would go play golf, have talk about business while they're out there, have a good time, and then come back and they're talking about stuff that I have no idea about at all. So I love your response that it's partially self-imposed, and there are times when you are just excluded. And this, the name of this is becoming inclusive. So we obviously hope that people would be more inclusive.
But, Reggie, too, I want to also go back to the second part around when you have, that it's stunt where you're at, right? That it's stunt where you're at in a company when you don't have the support that is needed. And I would say yes, because how are you supposed to evolve and grow if you don't have the things that you need to support you doing that? And I think in some ways that's where, to an earlier point, it is kind of like you're being set up to fail a little bit, because it's kind of a little backwards to say to someone, be an entrepreneur on your own, even though you don't have the resources that you need, but then also at the same time, wonder why that person's not progressing. I mean, I think about it when I was in undergrad and when I was getting my master's, like every grade, every time I went up a year, I learned more things to become more equipped because I had the resources of different teachers, the library, different things like that to get me to the next level so that I could get my master's, so I could get my bachelor's before that. Like, to me, it's like, there's steps to developing somebody and there's things people need to do that. I think the entrepreneur thing is having the mindset to take advantage of the resources when you have them. Because
and thinking out of the box. I've talked to you on numerous occasions, and there's just stuff because we have this different in age. I think it's just 10 years difference. We have this difference in age, and there's stuff that you're thinking of differently because of life experience, because how technology has advanced, and you're thinking out of the box saying, hey, Reg, we might not have dollars for this, but we can do that. That's a little bit different. That's
Right. And that's where I think that's the entrepreneur mindset that you're talking about, because vice versa, there's things from your experience that are helpful for me and have been since we've been working together. So I think it's, kind of that conundrum, right? Because you can't really ask of somebody literally in some ways, because entrepreneurs take out loans. Entrepreneurs, they do all sorts of different things. It's not like they just can go out in the world and say, oh, I want to start a business. Like, they also need resources. Entrepreneurs utilize resources. So in the workplace, I think that mindset is really fitting for, like you said, thinking outside of the box and using the resources that you have to think out of the box, to develop, to innovate, that kind of thing. How do I take what I have and do something new? But if you have nothing to take to do anything new, if you don't have anything to take from, no toolbox, well, then you are kind of stagnant. So then how do you develop? How do you grow?
It reminds me of the situation with social media. When I was working for the advertising agencies, social media, you could do things organically. So you could grow that following organically. Yeah. Today, it's just a totally different world. And you point that out to me, but it's true. Yeah. I can put out some things on my social media today, and there's people in my social media sphere who will never see it.
Yeah, the algorithms. It's a whole different world. Now you can. It's still that mindset of you spend money to make money,
and that's hard. For someone like me to understand, because I have been in this whole thing like, why can't I do it organically?
Well, and there's no guarantee of an ROI, right? You don't really know. And I think that's what also can make people kind of uncomfortable too, right? Because it's like, you don't know, and it can be scary. I'm going to put $5,000 down. I may not get any of it back. I may not break even, so.
Absolutely. But this is the way I'm connecting it is that you're saying that being entrepreneurial, shouldn't be a tough word to say. But being that way doesn't mean that you still don't need resources.
Correct.
So I love what you said. I know entrepreneurs who have a credit card. So when you say take a loan, they have a credit card. It's like taking a loan for them, and they're going off charging stuff. So this is not to beat companies up, but rather to say, let's take a step back and say that when people fail, I think leaders, and we've been talking a lot about leaders, I think leaders should step back and say, did they fail because they were set up to fail? Mm-hmm. Or did they fail because they didn't know what they were doing, or they took too big of a risk or whatever? And I think you approach those things differently. If they were set up to fail, you say, okay, what kind of things can I provide them? If they took too big of a risk, you sit down with them and figure out what was their strategy and why did they do that, and see if that's consistent with the entrepreneurial spirit by which you told them to go out and work in the world. If they failed because they didn't know what they were doing, do they need more training or things of that nature? But the biggest question is, when people fail, is their growth stunted? Can they still move through the company? And what has been found is that for many people, that is just not the case.
I'm just going to stop you really quick because I want you to keep going, but I think where sometimes it can be difficult for leaders to say, were they set up to fail because they take it really personally? Like, you set that person up like it's your fault, when that's not what it is. It's, did I put the infrastructure in place to help an individual, to help a team? It's not saying that you've ruined their entire career and they've got I think it's the accountability for overall, what have you done to create an environment for people to succeed and grow. So I just wanted to point that out too.
Oh, this point that you're making is a very important point. Whenever you say someone's set up to fail, you have already said to somebody else, you didn't do right.
Yep.
And so now I need to defend that. I need to defend that as opposed to listen to that. Is that I didn't have the resources I need. Now, there are sometimes that people will say they didn't have the resources they need, and they did.
Yep, that too.
So I'm just saying, listening and evaluating versus being reactive. Be like, oh, I made sure you had everything you needed.
Yeah.
Okay, listen to me for a sec. I'm saying I needed this tech person. We didn't have it. So we worked around it and tried to move forward. But this was the result of not having this tech person. This is what the tech person would have done, A, B, C, D, E. This is how we would have succeeded as opposed to have failed. That's a different thing. Now, when you tell me, look, I gave you the tech person. I gave you 2 tech people because you said that you needed 1.5. So we gave you 2 and you still failed. So now that's a different discussion. But the biggest thing that I don't want to get away from, Kat, is failure is learning.
Yep.
You talked about this in college, and you've long been out of college. So make sure
the point about my age,
make sure people know that, because they'll be listening and they'll be thinking, did she just get out of college? No, you've long been out of college.
People often think that, and I'm pushing 30.
Right. So wanted to make sure we said that, but being able to fail, sometimes you have to have these experiences as opposed to everything just going well. And you talked about that before this call, about needing to have some of those experiences because you need to go through some of that stuff. So, for instance, with budgeting, I think my first budget, when I was working in advertising, I don't think that was the greatest budget ever. It got through. I made a few mistakes, but after 3 times doing a budget, I understood all the things I needed in that particular environment. But what was really interesting, when I moved to a different environment, budgeting was totally different there. So just having some of that flexibility, be like, there's a learning curve. So it is their opportunity to fail. I don't know if I'm being clear here or just rambling on, but
No,
this.
I want to answer that, but there's before we move to that really quick, my last thing I want to make about our previous avenue we were on is I also think there's something to be said for, sorry everybody, for asking for what you need. And I know that too is a place where leaders will say, well, people need to ask for what they need. And 100% people do need to ask for what they need, but people shouldn't have to ask every single time they need something. Because if you have an overall strategy and overall goal, people should have that. If you're asking for entrepreneurship, then people should be able to ebb and flow in there, and not every time, because that can take a while to ask somebody what for something and then go through why you need it and then go through all those different steps. That's why like having a budget is helpful, or setting up parameters is helpful, because also, yes, ask for what you need. That's not helpful either. And that's where it's not on the leader. Like you need to say if you need something. Sitting back and just being in a lull of I don't have what I need, like that's not helpful either. That's not a good place to be. But also on the leadership side, to have it set up where every single time in certain departments, that just doesn't work, where every single time they want to do something, they have to ask for every little thing. So I think there's just opportunity there. So I just wanted to get that point across too, because I'm sure there's some leaders that are like, well, people should need to ask. And like, I hear you, but also this is the other side of that coin.
I love that. now I have my cough. But I love that because there is an individual responsibility. I think what happens here is that each side usually wants to point to the other side.
Yeah, wants to be right.
So the individual who is working in that position wants to say, the people didn't provide me with what I needed.
Yep.
And then the company wants to say, well, they didn't ask for what they needed. It actually should be more of a partnership.
Yes, a team.
It's called a team for a reason. Is that you as the boss or the leader, you have a budget and fiscal responsibilities. I, as an employee, have a budget and fiscal responsibilities, but they should not be separate. At some point in time, they need to converge. We need to be on the same page. So yes, I need to ask, but also as a leader, you need to anticipate as well. You need to say, hey, if we're growing or moving in this area, here are some of the things that we need. Now, we've talked about this a lot, so I want to bring it back to why this is important from a DEI perspective. And it's really important because, again, it has been shown that women and people of color have a shorter fuse for being able to fail. So I don't know if you create, as leaders, you guys create parameters for how people fail, how long they can fail, how many times. I'm not really saying that, but I'm saying that judgmental piece of, okay, they failed, they're done, or okay, they failed, we're not going to promote them. It's just not. It's really short-sighted and ill-advised, if I may say. That's what I would say to that.
Yeah, and there's like unconscious biases to work through and different DEI stuff. I think of course, that's what we do with a lot of our clients is work on that, their initiatives, their journeys, because there's background stuff that's rooted in why that happens. But it is. I mean, there's stats on that. You read about it, you see it, you hear it, like that. There's just a shorter lifespan for people of color and also women when it comes to that type of thing. But I want to make clear too that we're also not saying it's intentional.
But
like
somebody's sitting there saying, okay, I'm gonna make sure the cat fails today.
Yeah.
That's gonna be my job.
Right, but one of the things that Doug also says is, often people will attach to like-minded people, like people that are like you. It's often easier for people to just attach to that person, agree with that person, be in line with that person. And this other part Doug didn't say, this is my own thing. I think that's why sometimes that defaults where that person that's not like you ends up on the back burner, not in a situation to succeed, has a shorter lifespan. Because, I mean, you'll see it, you get along, like to your point, the people that all love golfing together, they get to golf together, they get to talk together, they learn more about each other. They're in this opportunity, in this space where they're like people. So there's just that level of initial bias. We all have biases. We all do.
Yeah, it's really funny. You made me think of when I was in grad school. I played a lot of basketball in grad school, and it so happens that my professors, at least 3 of them, played basketball, and these were older white men. They played basketball, and I was in their classes. Well, the women who did not play basketball didn't have the relationship that I had with these professors, because we were cursing at each other, elbowing each other. I mean. But we respected each other on the basketball court, and I know for a fact that it gave me a level of familiarity with those professors. So when I talked to them about classwork, I don't think that they bent over backwards to help me. But when I talked to them about classwork, it was like, oh, I actually know this guy.
Absolutely. That's same. I can relate to that. There were some courses in college that I just wasn't great at. Physics, not great for me. But I spent once a week, I would meet with one teacher in particular. I would meet with him once a week, go over everything, talk to him, built a relationship with him where there were times where he helped me out with certain things and made sure I passed the class, because him and I now, to your point, Reggie, now he knows me. He knows who I am in my core. He got to understand me. He knows I'm not just someone sitting there just in school to get a degree, don't care. Like, he really got to know me. And it helped, like your situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we end this, I think there's a couple of things that I'd like to leave leaders or anybody as they're thinking about a failure. Failure is healthy. It's an absolutely healthy thing for people to fail. You learn through doing, and sometimes you have to fail to be able to become an expert at it. So hopefully leaders understand that more than they think it's an indication of your incompetence.
Yep.
There's still that play of incompetence, but failure is in the doing. I think the other thing that I at least for me, is that become a partner with the people that you work with. This thing called unity that Doug talks about really says when we all succeed, it's better for everyone. Is that so if I'm working in the same company and I have a different opinion of the way in which you are about to go about your thing, let me just listen. Let's listen to each other. That doesn't mean I have to agree with that, but let's listen to each other. Those different opinions should make my product better, my productivity better. So I think that we need to work together a little more. A lot of times we're working in silos and then we don't know stuff and people want to keep stuff close to the vest. I believe that this more a real team approach would really help this whole issue that we talk about when we talk about failure.
Totally. Mic drop. I'm with you.
Well, this is becoming inclusive. I want to be inclusive and actually have this discussion more with some of our other guests. So I think we should do that as well. Thank you for being a part of this particular discussion. It's just Kat and myself, but hopefully it was enough. This is Becoming Inclusive. I'm Reginald Ponder. That's Kat Potts, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Becoming Inclusive is presented by the Kaleidoscope Group, your full-service diversity, equity, and inclusion partner serving clients worldwide. Learn more and continue the conversation at kgdiversity.com.